I'm not the house of cards that falls down easily. I'm strong enough to handle what you throw at me.
Welcome to Mental Health News Radio. I'm your host, Kristen Sunanta Walker. Just what are we going to discuss? The intimacy that is mental health. Let's continue to make it as comfortable as discussing brain health or heart health. This show has been on the air for several years, and we have amazing co-hosts. And then we created a network of podcasters on mentalhealthnewsradionetwork.com, a place where every possible facet of mental well-being can be talked about openly. My show, after several hundred interviews, the format is this: intimate, deep, funny, touching, sometimes uncomfortable, but always vulnerable conversations with interesting people. The goal is to have you, our listening family, many of you who have become my good friends, feel as though you are listening in on private conversations. Thank you for tuning in and becoming part of this amazing journey with me, and now with our network of podcasters. Just knowing this podcast might be helping any of you realize you are not alone on this journey called being a human being makes doing this podcast worth every second.
After all we promised, we'd be cordial.
Hey everyone, Kristen Sunanta Walker here, and I've got two amazing dudes. Do we even say dude anymore? I don't know. We'll find that out. I'm learning hip, cool things to say, which I don't even think we use the terms hip and cool, but whatever. That are one is a therapist, one is a radio geek, and they have a podcast on the network called All Ears. Cody and Sam, welcome to Mental Health News Radio, and welcome to the network.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us, Kristen.
Oh, and it's funny, you're in my old stomping grounds, Cody, and here I am in, Virginia going, okay, guys, now I'm going to be late for this pod, as you call them, because I'm stuck behind a tractor on a 2-lane highway.
We all
never
have
thought I'd say that. Yeah.
That's my favorite.
So tell our listeners, what your show is about and what the focus is.
Sure. Yeah. So we came together after I'd started a blog that basically just talked about like men's mental health topics and sort of related to like adolescents, young adults, and like identity building, just sort of like the challenges of being like a human being in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And
because there are many.
Yeah, because there are many. And then Kristen, you had me on the show a couple times, and I'm like, wow, this podcasting thing sounds pretty fun. And I could only think of one other guy who could do this with me. Sam and I have been friends since like middle school, and he does a lot of broadcasting, and he was like the perfect fit for our personalities. And now we've sort of taken it and ran with it, and have created different topics on financial situations, like the post-college stress. We've had guests on that have talked about addiction and their mental health histories and sort of like how to explore recovery. We've talked to people about music therapy, and the guests are just we have guests backed up until like December now. So we're like really excited about what we're doing.
And I love how, short and to the point your titles are, like War on Boredom, Cody's TEDx, Nobody Cares, Relationship Burnout, Money. It's to the point, and that's what people want right now. So that's not a, underhanded dig, because I don't do that anyway. I'm serious. Those are great. Like, this is just to the point.
Yeah, we thank you. We like that mystery box aspect of it, and like I'm the one who's chopping up these podcasts and then throwing them in and doing all the description stuff. So I found that like the more we zoom out, the better it is. I think our listeners tend to like it when we keep the title and the description a little mysterious. So then they're more compelled to like really find out what we're going to talk about.
I may have to change up the way I do things for that too. Who knows?
I mean, it depends. It depends on like what your listeners are interested in. I think because we're new, we like to have a little bit of mystique while still being straightforward.
Exactly. So how's it been? Because you've done, let's see, I'm counting now, 4, 5, 6, 7. You've got 8 shows up. You started at the very, very, very end of August. So you guys are doing terrific. That it's today's date is October 24th, just for listeners. It's 8 shows since August 30th. That's pretty darn good for 2 people that also work full time and have a life outside of their work.
Yeah, we're having a lot of fun. We actually have some shows backlogged too, because the way that our shows go, like what we wanted to do, is we tried to have the structure of Sunday, Wednesday as our podcasting days, and we've done a pretty good job at keeping that consistent. But then on a Monday, Sam and I spend like an hour during our lunch breaks just talking about what could we do for another pod, or we talk about something that really interests us, and then next thing you know, we've carved out another hour to do a podcast on a Monday. So
It becomes problematic because we get ADD with the topics. Like we'll think of something really good and we'll be like, oh, let's do it. And then we'll write a blog about a completely different subject. And we're like, damn, we forgot. We did a blog about this. Like, we gotta stay on topic.
we had a podcast where it was relationship burnout, which everyone should go listen to. It's actually a lot of fun. And then we got to the end of the podcast and I set up the next topic. I was like, oh, we should really dive into imposter syndrome, which Kristen, you and I have talked about this.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next day we thought of a completely new topic and ended up doing that instead.
Yeah, our podcast is full of empty promises, basically.
I love it. You know what? That's what people, well, I'm not going to say that's what people want. Empty promises. No, I don't mean that. I mean, they want, to hear authentic conversations. And I'll tell you this. Okay. So I have a friend who listens to a lot of podcasts and, they'll say to me, or they'll send me a clip of a podcast if I'm feeling like, because we all have those feelings where you're like, I'm not doing enough with my life. I'm not making a difference. I'm not getting enough stuff done, whatever it is that, when we're sort of having a little bit of a pity party. And what am I doing with this network, or what am I doing with my podcast? Does anyone even care? And he'll send me a clip of some show that isn't like the conversations that any of us talk about on this network. And I'll listen to it and go, oh, yeah, I feel real good about what it is that we do. Because there are these authentic conversations that all of us are having that are deep, that aren't so deep, or that travel along a road up and down on that. But they're real, authentic conversations, and they're all about connection, where some of the things that he's clipped and sent me, I'm like, yeah, I would not want to listen to that. And that's what somebody thinks is entertaining. Okay.
I couldn't agree more. That was well said.
Long-winded as usual for me, but anyway. So when you guys are listening to podcasts, and tell our listeners first before you answer this question, what's your age range?
Ooh.
Oh man. Well,
I mean, just so the two of you.
Oh, okay. I'm 25.
Yeah, I'm 25 as well. Cody's actually a grade above me though, and that's we were friends in school. He was always like a year older, so he was kind of big bro, but at the same time, I don't know. We have an interesting relationship. We're like rivals and best friends, and like sometimes we take turns being big bro. It's weird.
Yeah,
that's
that was really
happens.
well said.
Okay, so and you're speaking so much about what young men especially go through when it comes to their mental well-being. So I just wanted listeners to have an idea of who the hosts are of this show, All Ears. But what kinds of podcasts, or pods as you call them, are you listening to, or that you really like, and why?
Ooh. Okay, Sam, you want me to go first?
Yeah, you go first, Code, because we're gonna have two totally different answers.
Yeah, we really are. So okay, so I listen to some comedians. I listen to like Dan Soder, who I love. His podcast is great. I listen to the Bill Simmons podcast, which is all about like sports and culture, and he has a lot of really talented people. So like The Ringer, I listen to a lot of podcasts on The Ringer, and Sam and I are both really big basketball fans. So we always are giving each other podcasts to listen to with basketball, either with basketball stars or with people who talk about basketball. And then I listen to a lot of, and it's probably because of the whole TED Talk thing, I listen to like the TED Talk Daily or the TED Radio Hour, the NPR stuff. And then I try not to, because I feel like I do enough I listen to enough like political garbage, but I like will sometimes hit like an NPR, like just for like the political side. And then Kristen, I listen to your show enough now that I'm like, because it's one of the ones that I've subscribed to. So it just like pops up and I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. And then I'll listen to that too.
Oh God. Oh God. Then you get to hear my foibles in stereo. Fantastic.
Yeah, we'll follow up with notes.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my God. I know somebody the other day said, I mean, I have been listening since your very first show. And I said, what was the first show? Because I've taken a lot of those old shows down now because they just aren't relevant anymore. And they're like, oh, the show was about blah, blah, blah. And that was literally my first show. And I think, God, you poor person. You have some sort of thing growing out of your ear. Oh, horrible. But anyway, Sam, what about you?
No, that's a good point. I think listening, Cody and I have a goal of 100 podcasts at, I believe, within a year. So we're trying to do 2 a week. And I assume that our initial podcasts, when we're a year in, are going to sound like garbage. But that's just to us, beauty's in the eye of the beholder.
Right, exactly.
But the podcasts that I've listened to, and I guess Cody and I overlap a little more than I thought. Like, obviously, we listen to a lot of sports podcasts. I come from the sports broadcasting realm as a color and play-by-play commentator. And so I listen to like Jalen and Jacoby on ESPN radio. I listen to some Ringer podcasts, but then I have this total deviant side where I listen strictly to like raunchy comedians on podcasts. Like it's probably my favorite thing. Like the comedian Tom Segura, I listen to his podcast. It's called Your Mom's House. Don't recommend listening to it unless you like that type of humor. It's pretty raunchy. And then I listen to mainly comedians. Tom Segura, Joey Diaz, Joe Rogan, when there's an interesting guest. And then some eccentric sports personalities.
Gotcha. So do either of you listen to shows that are like some of the shows on the network where they're, we're talking about interpersonal relationships and things like imposter syndrome and mental health and stuff? Do you have any shows that you listen to outside of this network that are like that?
I used to listen to, it was called The Model Health Show, and it was all about like, improving like habits in your life. And like they had episodes on like meditation and mindfulness and episodes on like nutrition and things like that. And then also like how to connect with one another through like nonverbals. It was like, I went through a phase where I was listening to that like pretty religiously. And then I slowly like stopped listening to it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. What about you, Sam?
I think I take my mental health content in the form of, again, like through a different, like an unconventional form. I like a podcast called The Church of What's Happening Now. And the host was a former criminal, and he's an entertainer now. He's been in like movies. He's a comedian, but he talks a lot about his past where he was a coke addict. He was arrested for a felony, went to jail. A lot of his conversations center around his transformation, and he really focuses on the mind and like how people will behave in certain situations. And I kind of like that because it takes a real story and applies it to a mental health concept. Whereas like, I'm probably not listening to a more educational, straightforward podcast. I kind of like the real stories. And I think that's where the influence of our show kind of comes from, is giving those candid stories.
Perfectly said, dude. Actually, I think of our podcast as a mix between like, if anyone's heard of the podcast, like The Savvy Psychologist, it's like, these are straight facts. And if you're a clinician, you want to know about these things, which is sort of like how I orient. And then also a little bit of humor plus Sam's angle, which is like these more like eccentric type pods that have to do with like the mind and human behavior, but also have like a weird twist to it and that's the kind of crap that you bring to the table. Like, it's actually really cool.
That's the kind of crap that you bring to the table, but it's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's basically taking away the paper and pencil and just making it recessed. So you're still in school, but it's playful.
I like
if that makes sense. I just made that analogy on spot. That could be terrible.
No, I thought it was good. It's recessed. I like that. I thought, that's a good play on words. What I want my listeners to hear is the dynamic, between the two of you, which they are, and how, how important it is for men of your generation, boy, that makes me sound like a grandma to say it like that. But anyway, y'all know what I mean. How you guys really talk, how you are friends, what kinds of subjects interest you, what kind of subjects that, you bring to the table, because there's so much out there. Even I hear it of guys your age don't have anything relevant to say. They only care about what's hot and, or who's hot and rating people on social media, blah, blah, blah. And while some of that is true, it's not the full scope of who somebody is. So I like the fact that you're out there breaking down some of those stereotypes around 25-year-old men.
Yeah, I think when we first started the pod, Kristen, we didn't tell you about this, but we had done our first podcast was an absolute train wreck. We were like laughing at ourselves because we had just like got on our stumps and we're like, we're the two 25-year-olds who know everything. We're experts. Listen to us. And then we listened to it back and we're like, if we're really going to do a podcast with one another, we need to be ourselves. And so now what you hear is like the banter and sort of like us just being like ourselves, but also like providing enough insight because we are professionals and like we don't claim to know everything. Right. And that's been sort of like maybe the biggest piece of this is that people feel connected to like our personalities and then they're more able to like engage with us. Like we just had a mailbag where over 20 people like commented or were able to like reach out through Instagram and like actually, answer questions about like dating apps. And then we really went into it on the pod. And I think that was something that Sam and I are like, we need to keep doing this. Like these listeners know what's up. Because we're not going to claim that we know everything.
Yeah, based on what you posted in Facebook, actually just recently about, I think a lot of people misunderstand these mental health forums too, especially men our age. The number one thing that we would get labeled as for just being in this field alone is that we're soft or, it's not masculine to listen to something about mental health. And the angle we really take is like, hey, you don't have to be suicidal or addicted to drugs to be addressing your mental health. Like,
that's right.
If you could be a high functioning individual who, does what all the other people do, and you could be totally normal and fit in and still have problems. And
absolutely.
And I think we want to cover not only the people who are in extreme situations, but really appeal to those people who think that, something's wrong with them if they address mental health.
Exactly. Yeah. Are you talking about the post I wrote about somebody saying that they don't want anything to do with mental health, the term mental health?
Yeah, exactly. There's a big stigma just around the word.
Yeah. It was funny because I sent my reply, which I should bring it up and read it on the show here. I'm going to do that. Let me pause this recording real quick so I can bring it up.
Okay.
Because I want to address. Okay, so I'll read my reply to the email that was, I'm not going to have anything. You need to change if you ever change the name of your network, let me know. As if I would, it's completely ridiculous. And, that they realize that they can't be aligned with anything called mental health. And I wrote, thank you for your email. It was for further reiteration of why my entire network does what it does. I haven't heard anyone write, speak, or share what you wrote in quite some time, which lets all of us realize that this kind of thinking is still hanging around. Let me clarify one thing for you. Mental health is something we all have. It should not be stigmatized, and neither should the term mental illness. In my discussion with you, I did not in any way agree with your concern about being aligned with the term mental health. I simply acknowledge that sadly, in very backwards places, that kind of faulty thinking does still exist. Yes, that was a dig, but I couldn't freaking help it.
Beautiful.
And then I wrote, as a PSA, I will be sharing your thoughts with our listeners. And on the news program, I'm honored to take part in every week. The show goes out to about 100 million households across the globe, and they just asked me where we still see people not aligning with mental health initiatives because of their own stigma around the term mental health. Perfect timing. We won't be changing the name of this network. Good luck with all you do.
Wow.
Got him.
And, I wasn't trying to shake a shame finger, but I was also, standing up for myself. And of course they waited several days and then wrote back, and I haven't even read it, and I'm not going to read it because I don't care. But it was more, my director of operations read it and just went, oh, this person clearly has an issue, because what they wrote back was further reiteration of how they're right and everybody on the network is wrong. And he just said, you don't need to read it. So I didn't bother reading it. But, it's like people, including me, are so invested in being right. And that becomes a problem. Like we don't want to stop and go, maybe we could look at this differently. Maybe I am being bullheaded about something. Maybe I am being racist, or I am being a misogynist, or a misanthropist, or whatever it is for misandry, women who hate men, or whatever it is that we're doing. Maybe even though we think we're this most enlightened person that's open about everything, maybe somebody comes along and kind of points out, well, yeah, you do kind of have some underlying racism in there, or you do kind of have some da-da. And if we cannot go to the I'm not going to be wrong, because we go into a place of shame, which Cody, you know all about this being a counselor, maybe we can stay open to maybe there's some stuff to look at within ourselves. However, people want to hang on to being right no matter what.
Yeah. There's a resistance to growth if it's not the kind of growth that you think you want. You're allowed to have an opinion, but if the goal is to only be right, then you're missing a lot of other people's angles.
It's like also walking around and having a big zit on your face, and everybody is saying there's a big zit on your face. It's okay, but maybe you don't want to have it there, and you're like, no, I don't, no, I don't, no, I don't, no, I don't, because you just don't want it wrong.
How deep are this lady's pockets, by the way? She's trying to buy out the whole network and change the name of it. She goes, my business is so prominent that you need to change your entire network name.
Yeah, and also, trust me, it isn't.
Also, why would we, that was the big hang up with me, is like mental health. Like, what does she want to change it to? Like, we're talking, it's not like we called it the mental illness.
Yeah, and you said it, you emphasize health too in your response.
Yeah, and I'll even have some people come on that are very prominent. This person is not at all. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but they aren't. But I will have people. Yeah, shade. Kristen needs to work on that. But I will have other people come on that are very, very prominent, and they will even still try to say, "Well, I don't want to get into that term mental health because it's so stigmatized." And that whatever anybody's, everybody has the right to their own opinion about something, but here's where we stand with this network, and we're all united in this. We are not going to stop using the term mental health. We're not going to call it emotional health instead to make a softer landing, or brain health instead to make a softer landing, or whatever. We're going to keep calling it mental health, because there's nothing wrong with using that term, and the thinking around thinking that there's something wrong with it means that there's stigma, and that stigma not only bleeds onto mental health, it bleeds onto mental illness too, and it doesn't belong there either. I'm stepping off my soapbox now.
I feel like really guilty, by the way, because our podcast is in the psychology section of Apple Podcasts, so we're not even labeled as mental health.
Hey,
well, no, that's what you are. You actually are. There's a new term there's a new label in iTunes that allows you to pick. Thank God. Yay, iTunes. Love you, iTunes. We got awesome. Nothing but love from Mental Health News Radio Network. Nothing but love, because they added a term called mental health, and you guys are in that section.
Cool. Yeah, Kristen, I felt like we were in, like, have you ever watched The Wolf of Wall Street, where it's like, I'm not leaving. I'm not leaving. Kristen's on her stump, like we're doing like the chest bump, like we're not leaving.
Yeah, I did a chest bump, and I realized I just went horseback riding, so my arm was up, and I went, holy God, you need to take a shower. Thank God you're not meeting with anyone today.
Sounds like Cody and me in middle school.
Oh yeah, true. Good deal.
Oh man, that age when especially for young men, where you start to have BO, but you don't really realize it, and then somebody hopefully kind goes, here's a deodorant stick.
They weren't kind, Kristen. They were never kind.
Tell us about it, Cody. Tell us more.
You're bringing up some trauma.
All right.
Oh, not to bring back triggers, but yeah, I remember. My son was great about it. Because I was always blunt with him, and he won't even care about me sharing this. He just is like, whatever, mother. But I remember, I don't know, he was like 7 or 8. He came home, and I said, honey, I love you so much, and you smell like doo-doo. Oh. here's a stick of deodorant,
Uh,
use it. And he was like, okay.
I used to give myself axe baths and then think I was okay.
I was waiting for that. I was waiting. I used to step into your car and it was like a hot box in there.
Axe, I hate that stuff. Kelly used to spray it all over the place, and I would be like, okay, first of all, now I have an allergic reaction to just spray, but the hot box, oh, that's hilarious. So what else is still cool? Like, are Hot Pockets still something that's cool to eat? I mean, because I remember the car being hot boxed from the gaseous, turnaround of a Hot Pocket, and the running to the bathroom with severe diarrhea going, why do you eat them then? So what is it now that is the hot thing to eat?
Consume, like the hottest food out there?
Well, how you got, like, everybody would eat Hot Pockets. Like, are they still the thing that you run to as, oh yeah, I got to eat that?
You know what's terrible is that when you were talking about like what's the cool new thing now, like out here in the South Bay, it's so unfortunate, and we should probably do a pod on it at some point, Sam, but like vaping is way too cool out here.
Oh.
It's like, it's so cool that I have like middle school clients who are like, yeah, all my friends vape. And I'm like, buddy, you're 12. Like, what are we doing? I know, I just got serious for a second. I'm like, but like, what's the hot, cool thing? I'm like, well, it's this ridiculous vaping.
Oh yeah, I know. Well, for me it was clove cigarettes, but we're talking, 19.
Oh, for us it was Swisher Sweets. Like Sam, remember we used to go golfing and we said
we just buy a gas station cigar, like, and it felt like we were Michael Jordan in his annual like charity golf tournament.
I used to go golfing with Sam, and he'd dress up in like like a polo and nice pants, and I'd come in my basketball jersey
and basketball shoes too.
because my mom worked at the hotel, so I would just be like, I own the place, and everyone's like, who is this kid?
Get him off the field with this chalk cigar. Yeah. Oh.
Vapes is a good one. I'd say, yeah. Every girl, like, I remember girls used to be like, ew, smoking. Now they all vape. You know what I mean? Like, guys used to not want to smoke because girls didn't find it attractive. And now, like, everyone's doing it. So it doesn't matter.
I know. And now there's a huge lawsuit against Juul and a bunch of other, manufacturers of vaping. I don't know.
They banned it in Massachusetts. They banned vapes for like 4 months or some indefinite amount of time.
They're trying to do it in LA too.
I would have been one of those kids that would have vaped like 100%. I mean, we used to steal my friend's mom's satin cigarettes when I was in 8th grade. Okay, these cigarettes, they don't even make them anymore, but they literally had satin wrapped around the filter.
Wow.
Yep.
Yeah, we also had a guy named Bud that drove around in an ice cream truck that used to sell weed to all of us. But, that's just the way that it was back in 1982, 83, 84, where I grew up in Huntington Beach, California.
Oh,
honestly, that doesn't sound too different. I think the ice cream trucks will be selling weed again pretty soon, honestly.
Well, now they can do it legally is the problem.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, not the problem, but to anyone under 18. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Well, okay. So I still have to have the answer to the question, what is the hip food if it's not Hot Pockets?
Veggie burgers.
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah. We haven't gotten on it, but like that's the thing out here is like anything impossible.
Vegan. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. And that's the thing is, I don't know if we want it. I think it's just like something that's like being forced on us, and we're like, oh, I guess we want that.
Huh.
Yeah, I think it's the voice of a few there because I've had luncheons at work that are completely like vegan or vegetarian, and it's like usually pushed by like the one vegan person in the office.
Yes, I totally agree.
I can't see a bunch of dudes playing Fortnite going, "Hey, pop in that veggie burger."
See, this is
maybe not dudes. I just meant in general.
Yeah, this is where we're kind of out of touch here now that I'm thinking about it, because like we're talking about the work luncheons. We're kind of like rabbling about the things that we don't like about the luncheons that we do for our work. When really I have no idea. All of my like anyone under 17 who I work with in terms of like my clients and stuff like that, they always just bring in like a shit ton of candy. Like that's their move.
The
So,
one thing that'll never go is McDonald's. I'll say that.
Facts.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I do miss In-N-Out
McDanks.
Burger. I do miss In-N-Out Burger.
It's overrated.
Yeah. You know what? The last time that I had In-N-Out Burger was like 2 years ago. I was speaking at something in Los Angeles, and I went there and I'm like, either it's gotten not as tasty or I had some pretty deficient taste buds in high school. So,
They change.
Yeah. See, Sam, I feel like you had a question there. Were we thinking the same thing?
Maybe. Why don't you ask it?
No, Kristen, we can cut that out.
what? No, we're not cutting this. No way. What do you think? You guys are having a mind meld. What's happening?
No, you were talking about like how your taste buds is changing. I was like, well, what state were you in when your taste buds were so into In-N-Out?
Gotcha. Yeah. Was I high on? I just smoked some weed. I'm probably fairly certain. Yeah, that could be.
Well, we're not police officers. You didn't have to give us an explicit confession, but thank you. You're under arrest.
That was my teen experience, and I don't see where it's that much, different. I mean, we have different stuff, but it's still that need to want to go do this thing that we think is cool.
Yeah. I think it's still weed and fast food. That's still popular.
Right.
I think those are like the big two things.
Yeah, exactly. And then the Fortnite dudes with what they grab, it's probably still Hot Pockets and yeah. I mean, that's how I would get at some of the companies that I've owned over the years, where all my employees were young men. That's what I would get everyone. Tons of candy, Pizza Hut, Hot Pockets, and Red Bull.
Oh yeah, Red Bull's still the move. Sam and I used to go to we'd go to like when like Irving's or whatever the gas station was, and they had these BFC cans, which basically just stand for like big effing can of like Monster, and then we'd be just totally sugar and caffeined out for like 3 hours, and then we just like pass out at our friend's house.
That was before Monsters correlated to holes in the wall, holes getting punched.
Oh yeah, exactly. The violence that erupts from drinking those BFCs. Yeah, I know. It's the stuff that we do when we're young, because you can't tell someone who's between the ages of 10 to 20, or maybe even let's stretch that to 25. You can't tell them that what they're doing is going to have a negative impact on them 20 years from now. It doesn't register.
We're indestructible. Kristen, don't poke a hole in my worldview. I'm still indestructible.
Yeah. My dad warned me.
Go ahead, Sam. Your dad.
My dad warned me this. He said in males, there's a 30-year lag time. All the shit you do in your 20s and 30s. Like, guess what? 25, 30 years later, you're going to feel it.
Yep, it's true. I'm feeling the effects of being someone who's had a smartphone since smartphones came out, and really them because I was in the technology world. I was not only using them for myself and my business, but I was also setting them up for other people. So I'm feeling, because that was part of my business and setting up their database on the phone, all this stuff. So I'm feeling the effects of what that has done to my forearms, my hands, my fingers. I mean, it's kind of frightening. And the only remedy is to have surgery and not be on my phone as much, and certainly not on my computer as much when my entire company is run by those things.
Oh, yeah, wait. We have no comment. We have no comment because we are just actively dependent. So we're like, yeah, Kristen, that sounds terrible.
You ever seen pee in a snowbank?
Have I ever seen pee in a snowbank?
That's what I envision my eyeballs are going to look like after 70 years of staring at a screen. Like staring at a screen for that long is going to just melt my retinas. It has to.
Oh, I love that. The way it was asked was just so sincere. Have you ever seen pee in a snowbank? I'm waiting for that was a Walt Whitman quote. But anyway, so tell our listeners what they can look forward to in terms of what you want to talk about, the kind of guests you want to have, where you want to go with the show?
Go for it, Code.
Oh, you want me to go? Okay.
You go first.
Okay. So our topics span from like, identity development, talking about relationships, talking about stress in the workplace, talking about like, how to best like connect with people and being curious about other people. We talk about how to like navigate your 25 to 30s and sort of like how people change. What else? One thing that I literally just talked about in the blog that we're hopefully going to talk about on the podcast is sort of like how we continue to do the same. It's like the definition of insanity, how we continue to do the same things over and over again, even though we know that if we just cut the habit, we'd ultimately grow and feel much better about the things that we are insecure about.
Right.
We are having guests from a whole myriad of platforms. Like we had a social media expert, we had a best-selling author. We're going to have another best-selling author in 2 weeks from now. We have people from a recovery center in the area that I work for that have done amazing work with teen and young adult addicts in recovery. And yeah, we're just really excited. Sam, keep plugging those holes. What did I miss?
Yeah, I think, we want to get as many, and going back to what we were talking about with the purpose of this podcast, is we want to get as many normal, like everyday people as well from as many fields as possible. So athletes, coaches, Wall Street traders, people who work at anybody who's living a corporate life right now, doctors, authors, TED talkers, the whole spectrum, because we're trying to be inclusive of everybody. And again, the podcast is, yes, it'll highlight some themes that, are a little more depressing than others, but the whole point, it's always fun. It's always light. And I think for the most part, we always try to take a dilemma or a challenge and flip it in a positive way to show how it can be overcome.
And that is what the world needs, because we are wired to go negative. And our society supports that paradigm like nobody's business. It supports it with food. It supports it with advertising. It supports it with how you look. Everything that comes at you helps this natural tendency to be wired towards the negative. So any way that you can flip things over to a positive way to look at something, not, let's just all be positive and say affirmations all day long and then everything will be rainbows. That's not how it works. But as many positive influences we can have helps us combat this natural tendency to go to the dark side.
Absolutely. And we're going to be authentic. That's like, if you've heard our personalities, this is kind of who we are. Like we're going to be funny. We're going to act like we're really good friends because we are. And we're going to you're going to get basically all of us. And the other thing too is that like what the feedback we've gotten so far is that while our styles are unorthodox and we come at things from different angles, we always meet in the middle at the end. And then that gives the listeners a place to sort of like jump off and have their own opinions. And that's like really the point. I think it's so cool if the listeners get insight out of this, but they can create it themselves. So, because that's what we're doing.
And I think the last thing to really understand us, and you could listen and kind of see the dynamic, but Cody's clearly the professional in this field. And I'm clearly not the professional in this field. But again, we meet in the middle where Cody says something that's kind of clinical, and I take it and run with it in like just a life setting and try to translate it to a lay person.
Fantastic.
That's very cool.
I love it. Well, tell our listeners where they can find out more about you guys.
You can find us anywhere. Like Cody can plug the blog, but Spotify and Apple Podcasts are the two main podcast platforms. But anywhere where you can stream podcasts, you can find us.
And look for the show All Ears.
Right. And then we also have a blog that Sam and I run concurrently. And Kristen, you know about this. It's the Human Experience blog on WordPress, where we post that onto Facebook and LinkedIn and all our other platforms. So and that always has the All Ears podcast in the notes, because oftentimes we take those blogs and our reader responses and then actually do like a mailbag on the podcast. Fantastic. So that's been really fun too.
Fantastic. Well, I'm so glad that both of you are here. I love this. And I can't wait to, keep hearing what you guys are doing and having you come back on every so often to remind everybody and new listeners that I get where to go and find you, and having the voice that is, half my age as a part of this network that is male. So thank you.
And thanks for having us on. We'll continue to spread the good news about Hot Pockets out in the world.
And hot boxing after eating too many Hot Pockets. That's going to be important.
After.
Awesome. Thank you, listeners, for tuning in to another episode of Mental Health News Radio.
I'm passive aggressive, but never without good intentions. I heat up and act on my emotions.
Thanks so much for listening to Mental Health News Radio. Our podcast can be found on iTunes, Stitcher, and hundreds of other podcast apps, or you can visit our website at mentalhealthnewsradio.com. If you have a question or would like to be a guest, become a podcaster on our network, or join the amazing organizations that help keep us on the air, please email us at info@mhnrnetwork.com. Get ready for that special goodbye from our resident therapy dog, Miles, and a special thanks to Emily Sohn for letting us use her incredible song, Cordial, for our podcast music. Listen to the full song on SoundCloud at emily.sonne.
Don't be surprised when I don't hate on you. After all, we promised we'd be cordial. Sometimes in you I can fight it.
Good boy.